This happened when I was about 26. I was working the closing shift at a warehouse that handled late-night inventory and shipping. It wasn't a bad job. Just long hours, mostly quiet, and a huge building to walk through every night. Closing up always took a while. The place was massive, and part of the process was walking through each section, turning off the overhead lights one by one. That meant, as I moved deeper through the warehouse, I left total darkness behind me. And on some nights, that felt heavier than others. This particular night felt wrong from the start. I couldn't explain why. I had done this routine dozens of times, but as soon as I started making my way through the aisles, I got this weird feeling, like something was off. Still, every step I took forward, I got more and more convinced I wasn't alone. By the time I made it to the far end of the building, I was almost paranoid. The hair on my arms was standing up. I kept glancing behind me, even though I knew no one was supposed to be there. I wasn't hearing anything, just this growing sense that someone was watching me from the shadows. I locked the last gate, switched off the final row of lights, and made my way to the exit. But before I stepped outside, I stopped. I couldn't help it. That feeling hit me again, stronger than ever, like something was just there. I turned back, looking into the pitch black, and that's when I saw it. A shape. Just barely. A shadow moving, then pausing behind one of the support walls in the middle of the warehouse. It wasn't just in my head. Someone really was in there. I didn't wait. I got outside, locked the main door, and immediately called the police. They arrived fast. I stayed out by the lot and gave them the rundown. A few officers went in to search. I was standing out by the patrol car when the call came over their radio. Shots fired. Things moved fast after that. More cars showed up. An ambulance. They put up tape. I just stood there, completely numb, trying to understand what had just happened. Here's what I found out after everything calmed down. There were 2 kids inside, 14 years old. They had apparently snuck in while the front bay was still open and hid somewhere in the back of the warehouse before I started closing up. Dumb kids messing around. I don't know if they were trying to steal something or just screwing around, but they were definitely not supposed to be there. One of the officers who went inside was pretty new on the job. Still on probation, I think. According to the report, the kids started throwing stuff at him in the dark. A wrench, a small box, and then a ceramic coffee mug. The mug hit the wall near his head and shattered. He said he thought he was being shot at. He fired back. One of the kids was hit in the chest. He died almost instantly. His friend, the other kid, didn't get a scratch. It was chaos. After the paramedics took the body, I still had to go back inside with the cops. I don't even know why. I guess they needed me to verify the scene or something. I'll never forget stepping into that warehouse, which felt completely different now, and seeing the blood on the floor, the shell casings, the crumpled pizza box someone had thrown, and then, for a second, I saw the kid, just lying there. That image stuck with me for a long time. I had to go through multiple rounds of police questioning and court depositions. Even though I had nothing to do with the shooting, I was the one who found them, so I was part of the official record. I had to walk through everything. How I closed up, what I saw, what I felt, over and over. No one ever told me if the cop got disciplined or let go. I never heard what happened with the family either. But I know that Rookie wasn't even 6 months into the job, and he'll have to carry that night with him for the rest of his life. So will I. I ended up going to therapy for a while after that. I didn't sleep right for weeks, and I never looked at a dark warehouse the same way again. The worst part is knowing it didn't have to happen. Just 2 kids being stupid. One bad decision, and it turned into something permanent. That was almost 10 years ago now. But I still think about that night sometimes. I don't do nights anymore, but for years, I did nights in residential care facilities. One of the spookiest was in a soul-charged dementia facility. 15D, 3 residents, and no one but me to keep an eye on them all. Around 3 a.m. in the morning, after doing an intentional round, where you check all the residents are safe and well, I hear the doorbell ring. I get a sudden wave of goosebumps because this is a secure facility and it's the middle of the night. I go and look put the window. There is no one there. I blew it off as being a hallucination. 10 minutes later, it rings again. I'm shitting myself. I go back to the window and check again. No one was there, but I looked across the street and a strange car was parked there. I take a photo of it just in case, and then I go back to my station where I've been playing a game of match the card suits with a delightful but very demented lady. I sit down and she looks at me and says, "What did the gentleman want, dearie? He looked like he had a bad night and needed a cuppa." Chills go down my spine, but I brush it off because hallucinations are common with dementia, and this lady is particularly prone to not being oriented to time and place. The doorbell rings again, less than 5 minutes later, and this time I am freaking out. Another of my residents is up and walking the hallway painting with a clean paintbrush to keep him occupied. I pass him on the way to the front window, and he turns to me and says, "Don't answer the door alone. He might hurt you," before carrying on painting. I'm fucking shitting myself. I'm trying not to cry. I don't know what to do. I'm a single 23-year-old female in charge of 15 people with varying stages of dementia, and the fucking doorbell keeps ringing in the middle of the night. And it's a weekend, so my on-call won't answer the place. Phone. She never does on the weekends. I look out the window and see the same car as before, and as I'm looking around, I see a shadow move in front of the door, and a person walks around the corner and then looks straight in the fucking window next to me. We make eye contact and I scream. My residents start freaking out. I'm freaking out, and the guy just fucking bolts. I call the police. They turn up. It's chaotic because I have 15 residents who have all been woken by the commotion and now have 2 police officers in their space. My on-call isn't answering her phone, and I'm struggling to deal with the whole situation. Eventually, after many cups of tea and Milo and 2 lots of PRN meds for the more challenging residents, we're mostly settled. It's now 7 a.m. and the handover shift arrives of a nurse and a caregiver. I tell them what happens, and they tell me that there was a woman down the road whose house was broken into and she was attacked in her bed by a drug seeker who ransacked her house looking for drugs. I have an internal meltdown because we have drugs in the cupboard in the medroom. Good drugs too. Morphine, methadone, fentanyl, etc. I can't help but wonder if he was intentionally looking for us and just took the next best option. For reference, the facility was an old converted boarding house in a gentrified area, so lots of old doctors' houses in the area. Easy to mistake the home I worked at for a regular house. I left that job not long after because they refused to hire a second person to work the nights, despite it being understaffed according to best practice guidelines. I hadn't thought of this in maybe 5 years. This happened a few years ago when I used to work at Taco Bell. I was part of the closing team, which usually meant staying an hour or so after doors were locked to clean, count out drawers, and prep for the next day. It wasn't a big deal most nights. We were used to being there late. That night, it was just a few of us, all women, doing our normal closing routine. It was around 1 a.m. We had just finished mopping, shut down the kitchen, turned off the outside lights, and were about to head toward the back when the phone rang. That instantly made us stop. The restaurant phone almost never rang after closing, and it went off the second the outside lights shut down. It was way too timed to feel random. My manager answered. I could tell immediately by the way her face dropped that something was off. Then she put the call on speaker. It was a man's voice, calm, clear, and what he said made the whole room go cold. He said, "I know there are only girls in there. I've been watching for a while. Don't come out. I'll be waiting for you." We all stood frozen for a second. None of us said a word. My first instinct was to tell myself it had to be a prank. Kids used to prank call fast food places all the time. Maybe someone saw the lights go out and thought it would be funny. But then I looked out toward the front lobby, and I saw him. There was a man standing right at the door, tall, wearing a light blue collared shirt tucked into dark pants. The part that made it worse was that he wasn't facing the door. He was standing still, facing away from us, almost like he was waiting for us to come out. I backed away from the lobby and said, "He's really out there." We immediately called the cops. It took them a few minutes to get there, but the whole time we just stayed in the back, completely silent, hoping he wouldn't try to come inside or go around the building. None of us wanted to find out if he had a weapon or what his plan was. We watched through the drive-through camera when the police pulled up. They walked over and talked to him. It was hard to see everything from the angle we had, but we could tell he wasn't fighting or resisting, just standing there while they spoke to him for a couple minutes. Eventually, they made him leave. One of the officers came to the back door to let us know it was safe. He didn't say much about who the guy was or what he wanted, just that they told him to leave the property and that he didn't have any weapons on him. They offered to stay for a little while in the parking lot while we locked up and left. We never saw that man again. I still think about it sometimes. What would have happened if we walked out that door without checking first? One summer, I picked up an overnight cleaning job at a really high-end country club. The kind of place that hosts celebrity fundraisers and weddings for politicians. It was over 100 years old, though it had been renovated so many times that most people didn't think of it as historic anymore. It just looked modern and expensive. But under all the polished marble and designer furniture, it still had a basement. And the basement was a different story. That place gave me chills the first night I saw it. It had low ceilings, exposed pipes, flickering lights, and this damp, stale smell that never really went away. It always felt heavy down there, oppressive. And I don't normally get weird about places like that, but something about that basement just felt wrong. I worked solo in that part of the building. My shift started around 10 p.m. I was supposed to clean storage rooms, utility areas, and a few locker rooms down there. It usually took about 2 hours, and after that I had the rest of the night to hang out in the members' lounge downstairs until the morning crew came in. On most nights, I didn't run into anyone at all. The building was supposed to be locked down tight. Security didn't patrol the basement often, and no members were allowed in after hours. So it was just me, the pipes, the dark, and whatever old energy that place held on to. One night, around 1 a.m., I ended up dozing off on the lounge couch. I was in that weird state between dreaming and half awake when I heard it. Voices, clear as day. At first, I thought it was someone walking down the hallway just outside the lounge. I opened my eyes and sat up. The voices sounded muffled, but definitely real. 2 or 3 people talking quietly. Then, I heard the door to the locker room open. It has one of those automatic push systems, so it makes a loud hissing noise when it opens. That's when I remembered I was the only one scheduled to work down there that night. No one should have been in that basement. The only way in was through a badge-locked security entrance, and I hadn't heard it beep. Still half asleep, I sat there listening. Then I heard someone laughing, like a genuine, relaxed laugh. It echoed faintly down the hallway and into the locker room. The laughter got closer, not like they were walking, but like they were moving deeper into the showers. That was when I heard water start running. Someone had turned on the showers. At that point, I was fully awake and creeped out. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to check. I just sat there on the couch, holding this empty wine bottle that someone had left earlier in the night. I wasn't even sure what I'd do with it. It just made me feel a little less alone. I kept thinking maybe someone broke in. Maybe a member had some weird access and decided to sneak in. Or maybe I was losing it. But the showers were still going, and that laughter wasn't in my head. I pulled out my phone and called the security guard on duty. He knew I wasn't the type to call unless something was actually off, so he didn't waste time. He got there within a couple minutes. We walked into the locker room together. As soon as we stepped in, the laughter stopped, like someone hit a switch. The room was quiet, but we could still hear the water. We walked slowly toward the back showers, and sure enough, 3 of them were running full blast. The smell of steam and soap hit us as we walked closer, but the room was empty. No towels on the benches. No wet footprints on the floor. Just water running and a strange cold feeling hanging in the air. I asked the guard if maybe someone had been here earlier, maybe cleaning staff or a maintenance worker. He said no. No one else had been scheduled that night, and no one had come through the locked entrance since I clocked in. We checked the security footage together. The hallway camera showed the lounge, me sleeping, then sitting up, then calling the guard. At around 1:12 a.m., we saw the locker room door open on its own. No one was on camera approaching it. It just opened, like the sensor was triggered by something invisible. We rewound, played it back a few times. Same thing every time. The showers, of course, weren't visible on camera, but we stood there for a while, just staring at the feed. There was no sign of anyone, no motion in the hallway, just the door, quietly opening into a place no one had entered. After that night, I requested to be switched to a daytime shift. I told my supervisor that the basement was messing with me, and surprisingly, he didn't ask many questions, just nodded and said he'd see what he could do. A week later, I was working outside in the gardens during daylight. I never set foot in that basement again. Nothing ever followed me. I never had dreams about it, but I still think about how real that moment was. The voices, the laughter, the running showers, and how it all just stopped when someone else walked in with me. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe something electrical triggered the door in the showers. Maybe someone really did sneak in and slip out without showing up on camera. But I've never seen cameras lie before, and I've never heard laughter from something that wasn't there. Whatever happened that night, it made one thing really clear to me. Some places are old for a reason, and sometimes they keep more than just history buried under the floors. I used to work night shifts at an elderly care home. Most of the residents were sweet. A few were confused or forgetful, but nothing really weird had ever happened. That is, until Ethel. She was in her mid-90s, pretty sharp mentally, though her body had started giving out. That night, I was helping her through her usual bedtime routine, brushing her hair, helping her into her nightgown, the usual stuff. While I was helping her sit on the edge of the bed, she looked straight ahead and said, clear as day, "I'm going to die tonight." I laughed a little and said, "Oh, Ethel, you're fine. You're just tired. Do you need anything? Want me to get you some water?" She didn't answer, just looked kind of far away, almost like she wasn't talking to me. I tucked her in, made sure her call button was clipped to her blanket, then went on to check the rest of the floor. Around 2 a.m., I got a call light from her room. That was strange, because Ethel didn't usually wake up in the middle of the night. I walked in, and she was gone. Not like missing gone. I mean, she had passed. But the weirdest thing was how she was sitting. She wasn't lying down peacefully like most people are when they go. She was sitting upright, like she had just pushed herself up to get out of bed. Hands in her lap, eyes open. It looked like she was about to stand up, and just stopped. No struggle, no sign of pain. It was like she knew, and sat up to meet it. We called it in, of course. Family, doctor, all the standard procedures. But I still think about how calm she was, how sure she sounded. "I'm going to die tonight. I've heard confused things from residents before, but this was different. She wasn't scared. She wasn't rambling. She was certain. And she was right. A few years back, I worked out in the desert near Midland, Texas, technically in a small spot called Goldsmith, which is pretty much nothing but dirt roads, oil tanks, and scattered warehouses. I was working night shifts at a shipping yard for drilling equipment. Motors, collars, heavy rig accessories. We'd receive them, tag them, paint over the serials, inventory the loads, and ship them out to different rig sites around the region. The warehouse I worked at was 1.5 miles down a dirt road, dead in the middle of nowhere. You couldn't see it from the highway. You'd have to know it was there to even find it. There were 2 of us scheduled each night, me and my supervisor, James. He was in charge, but he was always late, usually rolled in around 8 p.m. I didn't mind it much. I liked the quiet, and we were so far removed from the world that there weren't even neighbors. That night started like every other. I got there around 7, clocked in, painted a few incoming tools, ran some inventory checks, and then settled into the break room with my Xbox to kill some time until a driver showed up. That was our rhythm. Sometimes no trucks would show all night. Sometimes you'd get one at 2 or 3 in the morning. But it was just one of those weird jobs that was part boredom, part chaos. James still hadn't shown up by 9:45, so I called him. He picked up, clearly drunk, told me he'd come in when he felt like it. That was typical for him, but something about how slurred his voice was told me I wasn't seeing him that night. Whatever. I went back to playing. Now for context. This warehouse was dimly lit. We had one sodium light over the main yard and a few old fluorescents inside that always flickered. The only place with a decent view of the yard was the office window. The rest of the warehouse had long aisles, steel shelving, and heavy crates, easy to disappear into if someone wanted to. At around 2 in the morning, I heard the sound of one of the side doors creaking open. Not the main dock door, not the front entrance, but one of the side doors that we never used. The kind that takes real effort to open because the hinges are rusted and loud. I stood up and looked through the office window. That door was about 150 feet away from me, but I could see a figure step inside. He wasn't in a uniform, and he wasn't carrying any paperwork like the drivers usually do. It wasn't James either. Just some guy in jeans and a dark jacket, walking slowly into the warehouse like he'd been there before. I leaned out of the office doorway and called out, "Hey, you a driver?" No answer. He just kept walking toward the main aisle. Then he stopped and looked right at me. I'll never forget what he said next. He asked, "Do you believe in Jesus, our Lord and Savior?" That hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because I'm not religious, but because of the way he said it. Calm, flat, like he wasn't really asking. Like he already knew the answer. I couldn't think. My brain just went blank, and all I could think was, I guess I'm about to meet him. We stared at each other for a second, and I took a step back toward the office in case I needed to slam the door and grab the crowbar we kept behind the desk. I remember scanning his hands, trying to see if he had anything in them. A weapon, a bag, anything. Then, Just as suddenly as he walked in, his whole demeanor changed. He said something like, "I'm not here to hurt you. I just need $20. I used to be on heroin. I'm clean now, I swear. I just need a bus out of town." I didn't move at first. I wasn't sure if this was some kind of setup or if he was genuinely just desperate. But I could tell from the way his hands were shaking that he wasn't faking the withdrawal. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I ended up giving him the $20. I don't even know why. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I figured it was cheaper than getting stabbed and dumped in the desert. He thanked me and walked back out the same door he came in through. I sat there for the next hour with my heart pounding, just staring at the door, because the truth is, if that guy had meant harm, there would have been nothing stopping him. Nobody would have found me for at least a day. The warehouse wasn't on any regular patrol route, and I was the only person on site. No cameras, no nearby neighbors, just a dirt road in the middle of the Texas desert and a side door that didn't even lock right. The next morning I told James what happened and he just laughed it off. Said stuff like that, "Happens out here," which honestly is true. People disappear out in that part of Texas. I've heard the stories. It wouldn't have even made the news. I quit that job a couple months later and moved out of Goldsmith entirely. Now I've got a job with lights, people, and a front door that locks from the inside. But I still think about that night, about how close I might have come to being a footnote in a police report. Just another guy who didn't come home from work. Now for context, this warehouse was dimly lit. We had one sodium light over the main yard and a few old fluorescents inside that always flickered. The only place with a decent view of the yard was the office window. The rest of the warehouse had long aisles, steel shelving, and heavy crates, easy to disappear into if someone wanted to. At around 2 in the morning, I heard the sound of one of the side doors creaking open. Not the main dock door, not the front entrance, but one of the side doors that we never used. The kind that takes real effort to open because the hinges are rusted and loud. I stood up and looked through the office window. That door was about 150 feet away from me, but I could see a figure step inside. He wasn't in a uniform, and he wasn't carrying any paperwork like the drivers usually do. It wasn't James either. Just some guy in jeans and a dark jacket, walking slowly into the warehouse like he'd been there before. I leaned out of the office doorway and called out, "Hey, you a driver?" No answer. He just kept walking toward the main aisle. Then he stopped and looked right at me. I'll never forget what he said next. He asked, "Do you believe in Jesus, our Lord and Savior?" That hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because I'm not religious, but because of the way he said it. Calm, flat. Like he wasn't really asking. Like he already knew the answer. I couldn't think. My brain just went blank, and all I could think was, I guess I'm about to meet him. We stared at each other for a second, and I took a step back toward the office in case I needed to slam the door and grab the crowbar we kept behind the desk. I remember scanning his hands, trying to see if he had anything in them. A weapon, a bag, anything. Then, just as suddenly as he walked in, his whole demeanor changed. He said something like, "I'm not here to hurt you. I just need $20. I used to be on heroin. I'm clean now, I swear. I just need a bus out of town. I didn't move at first. I wasn't sure if this was some kind of setup or if he was genuinely just desperate, but I could tell from the way his hands were shaking that he wasn't faking the withdrawal. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I ended up giving him the $20. I don't even know why. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I figured it was cheaper than getting stabbed and dumped in the desert. He thanked me and walked back out the same door he came in through. I sat there for the next hour with my heart pounding, just staring at the door. Because the truth is, if that guy had meant harm, there would have been nothing stopping him. Nobody would have found me for at least a day. The warehouse wasn't on any regular patrol route, and I was the only person on site. No cameras, no nearby neighbors. Just a dirt road in the middle of the Texas desert and a side door that didn't even lock right. The next morning, I told James what happened, and he just laughed it off. Said stuff like that happens out here, which, honestly, is true. People disappear out in that part of Texas. I've heard the stories. It wouldn't have even made the news. I quit that job a couple months later and moved out of Goldsmith entirely. Now I've got a job with lights, people, and a front door that locks from the inside. But I still think about that night, about how close I might have come to being a footnote in a police report. Just another guy who didn't come home from work. I used to work for a local pizza place when I was 18. It wasn't a bad gig. The tips were decent most nights, and the area was quiet for the most part. I delivered all over a fairly large suburb, so over time I got to know the regulars by address and name. A lot of the job blended together. People paid, nodded, maybe tipped, and that was it. But there's one house I'll never forget, and I only delivered there once. It was a Friday night, not too busy, but steady enough to keep things moving. The order came in around 9 p.m. A large pepperoni, cash payment, no notes. The address wasn't familiar to me, but it was only about 10 minutes from the shop. When I pulled up, I remember immediately noticing how dark the house was. No porch light, no visible light in any of the windows. I double-checked the address twice to make sure I had the right place. I did. I parked in the driveway and got out with the pizza box in hand. As I walked up the path, the door creaked open before I even knocked. That already set me on edge. A man stood in the doorway, maybe mid to late 40s. He was wearing a dark t-shirt and jeans. Average looking, but something about him felt off. He didn't say anything right away, just stared at me. I forced a smile and said, "Hi, that'll be $17.25. He nodded slowly and said, "Come in. I'll get the money." I remember freezing for a second. I wasn't used to going inside people's homes, and I usually didn't unless it was raining or something. But it was a clear night, and he hadn't even offered an explanation. Just stood there holding the door open. I thought maybe he didn't want to leave the door open too long because of bugs or something. I don't know. I stepped in hesitantly, still holding the pizza. He closed the door behind me, not slammed. Just shut it, quietly. That's when my gut really started to talk. The hallway was narrow and smelled faintly like dust and something chemical. like cleaning products that hadn't been used recently. The lights were dim, but on. He gestured toward the living room off to the right and mumbled, "Wait there. I'll grab it from the back." I stood just outside the living room, trying not to look around too much. There was barely any furniture. A couch, a coffee table with nothing on it, no pictures on the wall. Just that quiet hum from a fridge somewhere deeper in the house, and my own heartbeat starting to thump. He walked down the hall and turned into a room I couldn't see. That's when the clock really started ticking. A minute passed. Then another. I called out, "Hey, you still good?" No answer. I heard a door creak somewhere in the back, like a bedroom door or maybe a basement. Another full minute passed. I shifted my grip on the pizza box and started calculating how much I had made that night. I could cover this order if I needed to. I didn't want to risk anything. I started inching toward the door, my hand brushing against the knob. I had just made the decision in my head to bail. I didn't care about protocol. I was going to leave the house, get in my car, and write it off. That's when he came back. He turned the corner holding the exact change, no wallet, just the bills in his hand. He said nothing, just handed it over. I didn't even offer the receipt. I shoved the pizza toward him and practically power walked back to the door. He didn't say thanks. He didn't even look at me as I left. The second I stepped outside, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't walk to my car. I ran. I jumped in, locked the doors, started the engine, and peeled out of that driveway so fast, I probably scratched the bumper. I remember my hands were shaking on the steering wheel the whole ride back. My manager asked me why I looked so pale when I returned. I didn't even know how to explain it. I just said the guy was weird. But truthfully, that word doesn't cover it. We didn't get any more orders from that house for as long as I worked there, and I never saw that guy again. It still haunts me sometimes. What exactly he was doing in that back room for so long. Why he needed me to come inside. Why was the house so eerily empty? Why he looked surprised when I was still standing there when he returned. That moment where I had my hand on the door and made the decision to leave, that might have saved me from something. I still think about that night more than I should. After my dad retired, he didn't want to sit around at home all day, so he picked up a night security job at a lumber mill close to where he and my mom were living at the time. The work was simple. Patrol the property a few times during the night, watch for trespassers, make sure nothing caught fire. That kind of thing. Most nights were uneventful, but there's one night he still talks about, even years later. It was mid-January. Cold, clear, dead, quiet. He got to the site around 11 p.m., clocked in, and found out the guy on the shift before him had already taken off, so he'd be alone that night. That wasn't anything new, but still, something about that night immediately felt off. He said it hit him the moment he stepped outside to start his first walk of the yard. He had barely taken 3 steps when every hair on the back of his neck stood straight up. He stopped walking, just froze there for a second, trying to figure out what was wrong. It wasn't something he saw, it was what he didn't hear. There were no sounds, no rustling in the grass, no wind in the trees, No animals moving through the brush, just total silence. And my dad's worked outdoors a lot in his life. He knows the normal rhythm of those kinds of places, and he immediately recognized that something wasn't right. He said his whole body tensed up. Instinct kicked in. He didn't even think about it. He just took a big step backwards toward the building he had just come from. A split second later, something massive shot past his face. It was a great horned owl, female, fully grown, and she missed him by maybe 6 inches. He hadn't heard a thing. That species of owl is almost silent in flight, and they're apex predators. My dad said if he hadn't stepped back exactly when he did, she would have nailed him with both talons. She landed nearby on a roof beam and just sat there staring him down. He didn't move. He said he remembered how wide her wings were, probably 5 feet across, and how she had this dead calm to her, like she wasn't scared of anything. Just watching. They're extremely territorial, and that mill probably sat right in the middle of her hunting ground. My dad slowly backed into the building and waited a while before going out again. When he did, he made sure to check the roofline first, and made a lot more noise. He said it didn't feel supernatural or anything. It felt real. Like something ancient and built to kill was right there in front of him, and he had almost walked straight into it without even knowing. What stuck with him most wasn't even the owl itself. It was that moment before it attacked. When everything went quiet, he said he'd only felt that kind of silence once or twice in his life, and both times, something bad was seconds away from happening. He never saw her again after that night, but every shift after that, he scanned the trees a little more carefully.